Flames were clawing up the pine trunks like they had a personal grudge. My lungs were full of razor blade smoke, and 4 people in police-ish uniforms were telling me I couldn't step onto the land I'd grown up on. Yeah, that happened. The badges looked right until you really looked. The name tags had that cheap laser-etched shine. And when the guy in charge, Wade Stockton, told me in a Texas drawl, this was a hazard response. Something in my gut said, no chance. I know fire, I teach fire. I can smell when someone poured accelerant, and this was a poor job, sharp, sweet wrong. I said my name, said this was my property, and asked to see incident command authorization. He reached for his gun instead of a clipboard, and that was the first tell. Second tell, a black SUV with a long lens aimed right at my cabin, like somebody wanted a tidy little record of whatever performance they were staging. Third tell, the suppressant in their sprayers looked like farm pesticide, not foam. You know what I mean? The color was off. The way it pooled was off. Everything was off. I started recording nice and casual phone in my palm, voice steady, even though my childhood home was turning into a bonfire. So we've got camping gear and hand tools in that shed, no hazmat, and you're telling me we need a perimeter. What frequency are you on? The young one blurted. New formula, sir, like he'd practiced the line in a mirror, and Wade rushed to shut him up. I said I'd call the sheriff to coordinate because real responders love coordination, and Wade's jaw locked so hard I could hear his molars grind. Then the chop of rotors rolled over the trees, heavy, not news. Chopper light. My heart dropped and then kicked back like a mule when I saw the county tactical markings. The helo kissed down in the clearing and out stepped Marcus Tank Rodriguez. Last time I'd seen him, we were crawling into emergency shelters during a burnover that should have killed us. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just took the scene with that slow, calm, head-to-toe scan and said into his mic, SWAT Commander Rodriguez on scene for reports of impersonation and arson. This is my scene now. Wade went the color of skim milk. Tank did what pros do, perimeter eyes on hands, radios hot, everybody where they should be. And then he asked the questions paper always answers if paper is real. Badge numbers agency incident command. The numbers didn't hit in any database. Their radios weren't on the county net. Their holsters looked like weekend warrior catalog buys. And that's when a woman slid out of the black SUV in a suit too expensive for a Wildfire Minerva Goldweight chair of the Lakeside Estates HOA, announcing herself like a queen and waving a folder thick as a phone book. Emergency demolition order, she said, multiple safety violations, and tried to hand Tank authority she didn't have. Civil paperwork for a criminal show cute. Her ring flashed when she pointed heavy gold band logo inside EcoMine Dynamics. Dad had a file on them. I remembered it the way you remember the smell of your grandfather's workshop mining outfit, with a reputation for cutting corners, then pretending the corners never existed. And while Tank pressed Wade and his crew, I realized something uglier than arson was in play. They weren't just trying to put out my life, they were staging a reason to erase it. Let me back up a sec, because if I don't explain the basement, none of what comes next makes sense. My father was Forest Service old school with a conspiracy theory streak he earned the hard way. He'd found enough buried tricks and timber contracts to build himself a little insurance policy, a fireproof room under the living room accessed by a panel behind the stone hearth. The flames hadn't eaten the interior yet, so while Tank handled the fakes topside, I slid inside, stayed low, and popped the latch. The air downstairs was cool and clean, and right where Dad said it would be sat the safe and the silent network video recorder that had been capturing our property's every angle for 3 years. The safe clicked open to notarize contracts between EcoMine and our HOA, like real seals, real signatures, no typo scam stuff, plus a target list for 12 lake properties rated by owner resistance, plus audio files with a woman's voice that matched Minerva's tone a little too perfectly, saying accidental fires are faster than eminent domain. Yeah, I felt my stomach do a full flip. There was a clause, so on the nose it made me laugh, mean and short. Phase 1 residential displacement through regulatory enforcement and accelerated acquisition procedures. Dad had titled the folder, If I'm Right, and I hated that he was. Footsteps hit the upstairs, then the stairs. Wade and one of his guys, desperate and sloppy. I grabbed the pneumatic nailer, truth, not heroic, just the closest thing with a cord, and leveled it mid-torso. Safety off compressor, sighing like a rattler. That's far enough, I said, trying to keep my voice from jumping into panic. Wade pulled a pawnshop pistol and said the word legitimate, like a vowel had betrayed him. Then Tank's boots thundered above a door, slammed, and his voice dropped down the stairwell. Weapons down, hands visible, and for once the universe cooperated. The pistol clanged to concrete. The partner bolted straight into a SWAT shield at the back exit, and within minutes the fire marshal and ATF were running the show for real. K9 sniffed accelerant samples, got bagged. Chain of custody started ticking like a metronome. The good news turned into better when two wild cards stepped into frame, Derek Ashford from Pinnacle Title and Lisa Chin, the county surveyor. They'd both been pulled into the scheme at arm's length, and under Tank's questions their faces shifted from defensive to sick realization. Derek had a folder of eminent domain prep that traced back to falsified hazard reports. Lisa had the real geological data and said it plain. The filings are wrong. The actual survey shows significant lithium under the lake, plus rare earths. Someone wanted this land and they wanted it quiet. That twist, it changed everything. This wasn't about my shed. It was about a battery factory's worth of ground. Meanwhile, my sister Sierra had gone full newsroom on the county road, live streaming to a viewer count that was rocketing like a bottle rocket. We argued. She wanted to post every receipt right now. I wanted a prosecutor to touch the originals first. We compromised. She posted redacted pages with watermarks. I read clean quotations into her mic, and within a half hour, a hashtag with our town's name and the word fraud was climbing the national list. If you're rolling your eyes at social media, I get it, but sometimes sunlight needs a lens. Then we took a punch. We should have seen coming. A state judge, Gerald Davis, ex parte TRO. Every lakeside property frozen imminent public safety threat 6 hours before the sheriff had to move on us. It felt like getting kicked when you were already on the ground. That's when Jasper Cridge, rolled up kiddish lawyer with a truck tailgate turned law office resume longer than his forearm and fire in his eyes, motioned to vacate for conflict and procedural violations, he said, while typing like a storm. Your father's banking files show transfers to accounts tied to Davis. This order won't stand. Yeah, I know. Sounds too good to be true. Except Maria Santos from the state AG's office arrived 20 minutes later and confirmed that payments from EcoMine subsidiaries to funds under Davis's control timing that matched favorable rulings in other counties and enough probable cause to suspend him on the spot. While all that was exploding, neighbors showed up like a tide. Ruby at the general store ran coffee and turned her back room into a legal hub. Old Eagle, a retired pilot with steadier hands than anyone in uniform, had his drone in the air, capturing clean overheads with GPS stamps that prosecutors love. His footage even caught fresh orange utility flags next to the logging road that weren't there yesterday, tiny plastic triangles that later matched pipeline route markings used by one of EcoMine's contractors. That little detail, no one told us to look for it, but the camera doesn't blink. EcoMine tried to buy the narrative CEO in a limo lawyer with a press statement about generous compensation and voluntary relocation, and then the day went darkly funny. Minerva tried to escape in a kayak, spun in place for 20 minutes because she ignored the current and got collected by a Coast Guard auxiliary boat. Wade's crew ditched into Ruby's store for sandwiches. She locked the door, called the real cops, and poured coffee for the FBI while they made the arrests. Dumbest criminals in 40 years, she said, and I didn't argue. EcoMine's big city attorney got routed to Lakewood instead of Lakeside, so he arrived 3 hours late to find his clients already fingerprint inked. Meanwhile, Sierra Stream drew an investigative reporter who tied our mess to a pattern across the West, and by sundown, a senator was on the dock talking about hearings. If you're waiting for the gavel, yeah, it came. The HOA was dissolved by emergency vote. The TRO got vacated as improper and tainted. EPA confirmed no imminent hazard that required demolition. The Army Corps flagged the shoreline for enhanced protection. ATF's lab pinned the arson to commercial-grade igniters, and the feds filed RICO against EcoMine execs. Sentencing day tasted like clean water. Minerva got 3 years plus restitution and community service. Wade and his pretend officers got time with cooperation credits and now go talk to recruits about why impersonating cops is how you ruin your life. Judge Davis lost the robe, the license, and got 2 years for corruption. And here's a twist I didn't see coming. One of Wade's guys, after serving, asked me for a job, said he could teach communities what fake operations look like so they could stop the next one before it starts. We brought him on probationary, and he's already helped 3 towns steer clear of trouble. Redemption isn't always tidy, but sometimes it sticks. 8 months later, I stood on the deck of a rebuilt cabin, steel roof, fire-resistant siding, cameras with redundant storage. Dad would have appreciated watching mist peel off Brambleberry Lake, now the center of a community conservation district we voted into existence. The Lakeside Protocol, the playbook we wrote in real time, had become a model other towns were adapting. Sierra wrote a book that paid for legal clinics. Jasper started a rural defense network. Lisa became the state's go-to expert on falsified surveys. Derek built a firm that hunts dirty title work. Tank took over an anti-corruption task force and told me, coffee in hand, this was just the first iceberg tip. Old Eagle runs aerial tours that keep the lights on at the resource center. Ruby spun up next to her registers. Kids wave at his drone like it's Santa. You can call it corny. I call it a town deciding not to be prey. That last evening before the first Community Defense Day festival, thousands of people coming in from places we'd only seen as dots on Sierra's analytics tank dropped into one of my cedar chairs and asked if Dad would be proud. I looked at the lake, at kids in bright vests, learning to paddle, at neighbors who had learned each other's names the hard way, and said he always told me the best way to honor land is to protect the people who love it. We didn't win by being tougher than a corporation. We won by being more organized than their lies and brighter than their shadows, sunlight, and a crowd. That's the whole trick. And if you're wondering whether the system learned anything, I'll tell you this: every time a slick suit tries to short-circuit a community, now I get an email with a subject line that starts, "We think it's happening here." So yeah, that's my story, start to finish, with the smoke still in my clothes and the hard part still fresh. If you were me that first minute with the fire snapping and the fake badges telling you to back off, would you have kept filming or rushed the line or turned around to fetch water or something else entirely? Tell me where you draw the line between order and obedience, between a rule and a racket. You know what I mean? Drop your take on right and wrong, on community versus corporate muscle, on how we should handle neighbors who go too far and officials who forget who they serve. Because this isn't just my lake anymore, it's a mirror, and we all have to decide what we're okay seeing in it.